Krishna, everyone. Happy Radhastami. Srimati Radharani ki jai. So we take the opportunity, wonderfully auspicious day of the appearance of Srimati Radharani, and who can aptly speak about Srimati Radharani. Nevertheless, I'll read a little bit what the acharyas say and what the shastras say in regard to the position of Srimati Radharani and the qualities of Srimati Radharani and her relationship with Sri Krishna. So there's wonderful sections throughout, especially Chaitanya Charitamrita and other shastras. So I'll just read a little bit. I think we need to understand, because we all know that Radha and Krishna, they're not ordinary. They are in the category of the Godhead, and Radharani is the personification of Ladini Shakti. She's not a Jiva, she's not Jivatma. She has her own category, Shakti Tattva, and Ladini Shakti specifically. But it's actually very wonderful to read all the intricacies of the position of Radharani and her qualities, and the position of the Gopis and so on. So I'll just read a little bit. Mahabhava Swarupa Sri Radha Thakurani Sarva Guna Kani Krishna Kanta Siromani. Sri Radha Thakurani is the embodiment of Mahabhava. She is the repository of all good qualities and the crest jewel among all the lovely consorts of Lord Krishna. So here is mentioned, now previously, in the previous verse rather, the essence of Ladini potency is love of God. The essence of love of God is emotion, bhava. And the ultimate development of emotion is Mahabhava. So we have this development for jivas once there is an interest in spiritual life. It is said, when there's an interest, when there is a desire, ado shara tata sadhu sangota bhajana kriya, it is said that one comes and associates with the devotees, and after following for some time the process of devotional service, one may take initiation from a bona fide guru to make further progress, and then following the direction of the guru, then one gradually is freed from the anarthas, all the contaminations. One becomes nishta, steady. One becomes very steady. Nishta means steady. So unless one is actually free from anarthas, one can't reach even the nishta platform, steadiness. And then from nishta, ado shadu tadasada sangota bhajana kriyatado nata niviti shat ashakti ruchi. When one becomes steady, one begins to, although ruchi taste is there right throughout, but when one reaches steadiness, then that taste becomes stronger and stronger and builds up to what's called a shakti, which is very strong attachment, a shakti. And then a shakti goes to bhava. Bhava, as mentioned here, is the beginning of love of God, bhava. And Prabhupada describes it in a few places as bhava is the preliminary stage of love of God, bhava. It means a transcendental emotion. And he has compared it to, Prabhupada compared it to just like a mango. The unripened mango and then the fully ripened mango. So the unripened mango is bhava, the beginning stages of love. And the fully ripened mango is described as prema, mature love of God, prema, as we talk about Krishna prema and bhava. And other places in the Shastras and the Acharyas talk about prema in a general way, and within prema there are all the subcategories such as bhava and anubhava raga and all of the sneha and all the different levels of bhava and going right up to prema. But even in prema, there are all different levels. And jivas can attain to a certain level and amount of that position. But when it comes to Radharani, she is described as on the level of Mahabhava. So Bhava is the prema, and then within prema there's a high position of Mahabhava that's exhibited really only in Srimati Radharani, although others experience some measure of Mahabhava, so the Gopis. But to the level of Srimati Radharani, that's not experienced by anyone else except Srimati Radharani, this level of Mahabhava. So in this Mahabhava, there's all different aspects to it. And in the discussion between Lord Chaitanya and Swarup Damodar Maharaj, when Lord Chaitanya asked him to describe the ultimate goal of life, and Swarup Damodar starts off and talks about Varnashram, and then and Lord Chaitanya keeps asking him to go up and up and up. Then he comes to love of God. Then he starts to talk about Srimati Radharani. And Lord Chaitanya becomes happier and happier when this type of discussion goes on. So at one stage he describes the ornaments of Srimati Radharani. Now within this position of Mahabhava, that really Radharani is the personification of Mahabhava. She is unique. It is said that Radharani's body, now as soon as Radharani gets a chance to see Krishna, her body is suddenly decorated with various ecstatic ornaments. And these ornaments include what's called the 8 sattvikas. There's all this bhava, anubhava, sattvika, vyabhichari. If you read it in the Nectar of Devotion, it's somewhat described there by Rupa Goswami, and also more described, a little bit more in his Ujjvala Nilamani. There's more of a description of all these different qualities that others can have, but really reach the perfection in Srimati Radharani. And so the sattvika, 8 sattvikas, transcendental symptoms. There are 33 vyabhichari bhavas. There are all different types of emotions of love. And here it is said, I'll just read a few of them, because she manifests these emotions in different circumstances, in different pastimes with Krishna. So here it is. Sometimes she manifests indifference, moroseness, meekness, a feeling that one is in a faulty position. She sometimes manifests fatigue. Sometimes she comes across as being mad. Here, sometimes she manifests pride. She manifests doubt, shock, intense emotion, craziness sometimes, forgetfulness, bewilderment, sometimes shame, sometimes concealment, remembrance. So these are listed here as part of the vyabhicharas. And so all different symptoms are churning in Srimati Radharani. When Srimati Radharani manifests these ornaments of many ecstatic symptoms, the ocean of Krishna's happiness immediately displays transcendental waves. This is a description as given here. Now, last week on Janmashtami, I was talking about different pastimes of Krishna with Radha, and I was talking about how there are different types of gopis, and Radharani is considered the chief of all the gopis. Some are considered left-wing gopis, and some are considered right-wing gopis. Now, here it is described that she is always deeply absorbed in ecstatic love and always feeling in the mood of a left-wing gopi. So, now Rupa Goswami, in his Ujjvala Nilamani, he describes a little bit about left wing and right wing gopis. He says, a gopi who is always eager to be jealously angered, who is very enthusiastic for that position, who immediately becomes angry when defeated, who is never under the control of a hero, and who always opposes him, is called a vama, or a left-wing gopi. And the right-wing gopis, a gopi who cannot tolerate womanly anger, who speaks suitable words to a hero, and who is satisfied by his sweet words, is called dakshina, or a right-wing gopi. So Radharani is considered left-wing gopi, and Chandravali is considered a right-wing. Because she's a left-wing gopi, her womanly anger is always awakening, but Krishna derived transcendental bliss from her activities. So Krishna enjoys her being in that position. So Krishna enjoys all different varieties. Now, here is described that the transcendental loving affairs between a young boy and a young girl is by nature crooked, like the movement of a snake. And because of this, two types of anger arise between a young boy and girl: anger with a cause, and anger without a cause. This is a quote from again from Rupa Goswami's Ujjvala Nilamani. So Lord Chaitanya, when he was hearing all these discussions and all these descriptions by Swarup Damodar Goswami, he was becoming happier and happier. And yeah, now you're getting to the essence of things. Yeah, Varnashram and matter and spirit and all the, yeah, very good, but now we're talking. Right, so of course Lord Chaitanya was in the mood of Srimati Radharani. So here it is said, Adiruddha Mahabhava. Again, this Mahabhava, this level of Mahabhava is a very unique level. Radhika Prema. She's on that Mahabhava Prema. Vishuddha Nimala Yache Dasivana Hema. Now, he says that Srimati Radharani's love is so highly advanced in ecstasy. All her dealings are completely pure and devoid of any material tinge. It may seem some of these emotions could, be considered mundane, anger and jealousy and this, people feel that. But actually, they're not on the material level. They're spiritual because they increase Krishna's pleasure, and they increase Radharani's feeling for Krishna and love for Krishna. And so in that sense, and Krishna's love is increased also by these exchanges. So in that sense, it's totally spiritual. Whereas in the material world, this actually mentioned previously, I read from one verse as Prabhupada describes that Ladini Shakti is manifest through Srimati Radharani. She's the personification of the pleasure potency of Krishna. And others can be under Ladini Shakti. But those jivas in the material world, their Ladini Shakti has now become transformed into the Mahamaya Shakti. So previously, when they were acting to give pleasure to Krishna in great enthusiasm, now due to that contamination of the material energy, now they've become crazy to indulge in interaction in the material world rather than interaction in the spiritual world. So this is a transformation of Ladini Shakti. So all the dealings are completely pure and devoid of material tinge. Indeed, her dealings are 10 times purer than gold. He used this example, 10 times purer than gold. As I mentioned, there's all these different levels of exchange, and Krishna, becomes more and more ecstatic. And it's an amazing how all these things are very much categorized and described, and examples given of interactions in this way. Now, Krishna, in his dealings with Radha and Radha's dealings with Krishna, as I explained, sometimes there's explanation, or sometimes it seems very illogical. But just like the description was given, that love affairs between even ordinary young boys and young girls are crooked like a snake. Sometimes there's rhyme and reason to it. Sometimes there's no rhyme and reason. Sometimes illogical things happen. Just like Radharani, an example is given here. When Radharani leaves the house, she's always very nicely dressed. And she's always very attractive. Her womanly nature is to attract Krishna's attention. Of course, all this is to attract Krishna. And upon seeing her so attractively dressed, Krishna desires to touch her body. The Lord then finds some fault in her and prohibits her from going to river crossing and stops her from picking flowers. He just, all of a sudden, you can't pick, she's going over to pick the flowers. You can't pick those flowers. Who says you can pick those flowers? These are my flowers. I'm not letting you pick those flowers. And then, because she's a cowherd girl, quite often, she goes with the Gopi friends across the other side of Jamuna to sell the milk sweets and all things like that. So when she gets to the river, Krishna goes with her, says, no, I'm not letting you go across today. Oh, no, we have to go across. No, you can't go. So things like that happen. It's like inexplicable thing. So sometimes she manifests some anger. She gets angry at Krishna. What do you mean? You can't stop me. So these types of exchanges. And then Krishna says, yes, I can stop you. And I will stop you. So all these types of things. So it's kind of, it could be reflected in the material world also, these types of exchanges. But in the material world, these things are very temporary. It's kind of affectionate type of dealings that are really only understood between that couple. Now, others looking at it might think it's a bit strange, but they understand it because it's a kind of loving, affectionate interaction. But in the material world, it's temporary and it quite often sours. But in the spiritual world, it continues eternally, and it becomes even more blissful, even more and more blissful. So there's all these examples given here. Again, this work by Rupa Goswami, his Ujjvala Nilamani. Right. So, in regard to now, I'll just read a little bit more. Mahabhava Swarupa, Sri Radha Thakurani we read. And of these two gopis, Radharani and Chandravali, Srimati Radharani is superior in all respects. She is the embodiment of Mahabhava. She passes all in good qualities. Her mind, senses, body are steeped in love for Krishna. She is Krishna's own energy and she helps him in his pastimes. No one should consider Radharani, Prabhupada says, no one should consider Radharani to be material. She is on the level of Krishna. She is fully spiritual like Krishna. She is not like a conditioned soul who have gross material bodies, gross senses and subtle senses also. All her material, there's nothing material. The body is spiritual, the mind, everything is spiritual. Her body and mind, Prabhupada says, are of the same spiritual nature. She is personified Ladini Shakti. She is the only real source of enjoyment for Sri Krishna. And Krishna cannot really enjoy anything else that is internally different from him, and really he finds his the maximum pleasure when he's with Srimati Radharani. So here in this section, there's a quote from Brahma Samhita. Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tabiya Eva Nija Rupataya Kulabi Goloka Eva Nivaschat Yakilakma Bhuta Govinda Madhipurusham Tammaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who resides in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, who resembles his own spiritual figure and who embodies the ecstatic potency of Ladini. Their companions are her confidants, who embody extensions of a bodily form and are imbued and permeated with ever blissful spiritual rasa. Now, Radharani, as Krishna is the source of all incarnations and expansions, Radharani is also the source of all the feminine expansions, and especially given here. What are those expansions? There are three kinds, as mentioned here. The beloved consorts of Lord Krishna there are three kinds. The goddesses of fortune, the Lakshmis, his queens in Dwarka, the milkmaids of Braja. These are the three categories of his consorts. And the milkmaids of Braja are considered the foremost. All these consorts, all these expansions proceed from Srimati Radharani. Avatari Krishna, Yache Krishna Avatara, Amsini, Radha Haitatina Ganana Vishtara. Just as the fountainhead Lord Krishna is the cause of all incarnations, so Sri Radha is the cause of all these consorts. So actually they're expanded from Srimati Radharani. The goddesses of fortune are partial manifestations of Radharani, and as mentioned here, the queens are described as reflections, and so on, and then here is described, technically speaking, by Bhav Prakash, by Bhav Vilas. The technical terms are given as far as what types of expansions they are. But she's the fountainhead. Prabhupada actually mentions here in his purport, they are identical actually, Radha and Krishna. They are combined. I always remember in Melbourne, I think they've still got it, that painting Vaibhavi did years and years ago, where there's that Radha and Krishna like combined in one person. There are two of them there. There's Krishna there and there's Radharani when you go in the Melbourne Temple Room, right? That's still there, Prabhu, isn't it? Yeah, so that was, Vaibhavi painted that years ago. And so they're like one person, but when you look, there's Krishna and there's Radha. So here, they are identical. They are two, but they are actually one. Now, here it is different names of. I thought this is a very nice verse here. Govinda Nandini Radha. Govinda Nandini Radha. Govinda Nandini Radha. This is one name for Radharani. Govinda Nandini Radha means she who gives pleasure to Govinda. And Govinda Mohini. We had one devotee named Govinda Mohini. You remember Govinda Mohini? Govinda Mohini. So what is Govinda Mohini? She who mystifies Govinda. She's called Govinda Mohini. Govinda Sarvashva, the be-all and end-all of Govinda. Siromani Sarvakanta. Siromani means the crown jewel. So of all the Lord's lovers, Srimati Radharani, she's the crown jewel. Siromani Sarvakanta. I thought that so this is a very famous verse. Devi Krishna Mai Prokta Radhika Paradevata Sava Lakshmi Mai Sarva Kanti Samo Hini Para. The transcendental goddess Radharani is the direct counterpart of Lord Krishna. She's the central figure for all the goddesses of fortune. She possesses all the attractiveness to attract the all-attractive personality of God. She is the primeval internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now I think I've described before when Srimati Radharani, she appears in different ways in this world when it's time for Krishna's Leela, and Radha accompanies Krishna and all the Gopis. There are some who descend from the spiritual world to the material world. And Radharani appears sometimes in different ways in different kalpas. Now there's one description that when Vrishabhanu was meditating, he'd gone to Govardhana and he was in the Jamuna and he was meditating, he was doing some tapasya. They didn't have any children, he and Kirtida. And when he was in his meditation thinking of the Lord, there was this very golden 1,000-petal lotus floating down the Jamuna, and it came and it touched him and it woke him from his meditation. And when he looked, when he looked, he saw a molten gold-colored little baby girl in the middle of that lotus. And she was moving her hands and legs everywhere very, very vigorously like that. So a molten gold, I've never seen molten gold, but you can imagine a molten gold complexion baby little girl. So he just took this little girl and took her home and raised her as his daughter. So that was one time. Another time, they didn't have children, so actually Kirtida suggested that why doesn't he go to the Jamuna and practice or tapasya, and especially to worship the goddess Katyayani. And if the goddess Katyayani is pleased, she may give the blessings that they can have children. So that was Kirtida's suggestion. And so he went, and he actually did tapasya. He sat and practiced Mauna Brat. He wasn't saying anything to anyone, just was in deep meditation there on the banks of the Jamuna. And then he heard a voice, and the voice said that actually practicing tapasya without having received initiation and the mantra from the initiation from a bona fide guru won't have any effect. And so he thought like that. Then so he sought out Kratu Muni, who was nearby, and had asked to be initiated. And so he gave him, actually it's mentioned that he gave him the Hare Krishna mantra. Now we know Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare is the vocative representation of Srimati Radharani, the internal potency, that is Radharani. But anyway, he was chanting this mantra. After some time, Goddess Katyayani appeared to him. She was very pleased with him, she said so, and said, I'm very pleased by your tapasya and by your chanting, and I'm here to bless you and give you this baby. And she had an oval egg-shaped container, a little box, very nicely decorated, big size, and she gave to him, and then when he opened that, there was a little baby inside. So that's another description of Radharani coming in that way. So this is described by the Acharyas as her coming in different kalpas in different ways. And then there's another story of how Vindhya, Parvata, the mountain, was jealous of the Himalaya, and Himalaya had Parvati as a daughter and Lord Shiva as a son-in-law, and then she, there's a whole other story, so I won't go into that. That's quite involved, quite a long story. But different ways Srimati Radharani came into the world, and very extraordinary way how she left from the world also. At the end of Krishna's pastimes, both Radha and Krishna met at Siddha Ashram, which is a very holy place where especially Lord Ganesha is worshipped, and many sages go there to practice tapasya. So all the residents of Vrindavan came there one time on an auspicious occasion, and Krishna went there, so they all met, and Radharani wanted to take Krishna back to Vrindavan, so Krishna brought a big chariot, and he went with Radha, and he put all the inhabitants of Vrindavan in the chariot, and they all went back to Vrindavan. Then he gathered them around and spoke to them all, and then he spoke to Radharani privately and said that very soon my pastimes are coming to an end, and now it's time for all of you to go back to the spiritual abode, to Goloka of the spiritual world. So just as he said that, a big chariot from the spiritual world arrived, and all of them got on. Radharani was very beautiful. There's a nice description of this. And they all got on, and all the inhabitants got on in their self-same bodies. Those gopis who didn't have a completely spiritual body and are given an opportunity to be in the Leela, they also boarded, and there's a description how they gave up those bodies and attained spiritual forms, gopi forms. But anyway, that chariot went back to Goloka of the spiritual. So Radharani's appearance, Radharani's disappearance from this material world, they're not ordinary affairs. not ordinary affairs. So there's many nice, I thought that this morning I'd speak a little bit about Radharani's position, Radharani's qualities, a little bit of the interaction between Radha and Krishna. They're very extraordinary. And I said actually no one can really understand these things. The acharyas give some just so for a little bit of our understanding, but really that intimacy can only be there between and fully appreciated between Radha and Krishna. And of course Lord Chaitanya appeared and he was relishing. He is a combination of Radha and Krishna. But there's many nice sweet stories to be told. One of my favourites, I might have told this before, is when Radha disguised herself as a cowherd boy. Did I ever told this one? Have you heard this one? So Radha wanted to test Krishna. She wanted to test Krishna's love for her. And so she decided to change herself into a cowherd boy and go and visit Krishna. And no one could recognize her, but now she had a name, Priyatama. Priyatama was her name. And she was a cowherd boy. So she came there and introduced, and Krishna was very attracted to this cowherd boy. He'd never seen this cowherd boy. I've never seen you around. Are you from around here? Oh no, I'm from a little distance away. I've just come here, I'm visiting here. Oh, so please come in. So so they sat down, there was some conversation going on. And after some time, please don't mind, Radha, in the form of Priyatama, she said, no, don't mind. Are you betrothed yet? Who is? Yes, I am. Radha is my one. Oh, Radha, I think I've heard of Radha, she said. I think I've heard of Radha. Don't mind, I know we've just met, but don't mind, I've come, I know another girl that's far superior to Radha. Don't mind, but far superior to this Radha. There's some questions about her family and her nature and everything like that. So I actually got a letter here from the family about this girl, giving a nice description with the references. So I think that you should read this letter because I think that she would be a more suitable bride for you. So this was Radha testing Krishna. She would be more suitable. No, my only goddess is Radha. So, Krishna was arguing with her, no, I can't take it. I don't want to have it even. My only goddess is Radha, I can't. No, please, just read it, just have a look. So, Radha forced this letter on Krishna. So he took it, he had one look and he just tore it up and threw it away. So Radha internally, of course, she wasn't manifesting, but internally she was very happy. But she wasn't fully satisfied yet. And so she thought that, I can see that you're very attached to this Radha. But so, actually, if you love her so much, just by your desire, you go into meditation, you should, I'd like to meet her. Maybe you could just bring her here. Just, go into a meditation. I'd like to meet this Radha, Radha said about herself. So he said, yes, I will think about Radha and by the force I will bring her. So try as he might, Krishna couldn't bring Radha, and then Radha as Priyatama just disappeared. So when he looked, Priyatama was gone. And Radharani hadn't come either. So then when he looked again, he was transformed into a bangle seller. He was transformed into a woman and a bangle seller, and there was a whole bag full of bangles, very, very beautiful bangles. So Krishna thought, well, this is a nice leela here. So he thought that I'm going to go in and sneak in to see Radha disguised as a bangle seller. So Krishna went as a bangle seller to the Bashan area, and she was calling out, anyone interested? She was not making out she was a bangle. Anyone interested? I have some very nice bangles here, very high quality. This is the best quality, like that. And so he's calling out, going here and there. And then Lalita came and said, oh, you have bangles? I'd like to see those bangles. Yeah, I have very beautiful bangles, but today I've had no luck. No one has bought any of the bangles. Why haven't they bought the bangles? Oh, I think because they're, very beautiful, they're very expensive, and no one wants to pay the price. The people around here must be so thick, he said. They must be so thick. People around here must be so thick that they don't know what a good bangle is, and they're so miserly they don't want to pay the price for the bangle. But I'm not going to sell them cheap. So this is my price. So Lalita said, well, you're not going to sell many bangles making derogatory remarks about the people of this area. And so then she said, well, maybe my Swamini, maybe Radha might be interested. She was probably the only one who could afford these bangles, right? Because her parents are very rich. And so, she bought. So Krishna was very pleased. Said, now I'm getting inside now. So Lalita bought Krishna in the form of the bangle seller inside to meet Radharani. So Radharani. So when Krishna saw Radha, and Radha was very attracted to this bangle seller for some strange reason, but she didn't pick up immediately who it was. But Krishna, when he saw Radha, he was very attracted. But Radharani said, well, they're very nice bangles. Maybe try them on some of these other gopis first to see if they fit, and they're interested to buy them. So Krishna tried them on, but none of them really fit. But some of the little manjaris were there. Their wrists were small enough, and they did fit on their wrists. So, but then they said, "Oh, we can't afford them. We're just little girls. We can't afford them." So, and then Krishna said, "I think that these are best for Radha." And so he got some bangles, and he went to put the bangles on Srimati Radharani. And as soon as Krishna touched Radha and Radha touched Krishna, then they just froze. They just froze, looking at each other. And then everyone was looking now, what's going on? They're all just frozen, not moving, almost like hey, is anyone there type of thing. So they froze. And so, but then Lalita saw underneath in the waistband there was a flute. And she said, this is Krishna in disguise. So the jig is up. So as soon as she said, this is Krishna in disguise, both Krishna and Radha came to external consciousness. But everyone was very happy. They were jumping up and down. And so Lalita led Radha and Krishna to a big, beautiful throne and had them sit on there. And then everyone started worshipping Radha and Krishna. So it's a very, one of my favourite stories of Radha and Krishna. So Hare Krishna, thank you very much. That's all we've got time for this morning. So Radhastami ki jai. Have a happy Radhastami day. Radharani ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol.